Okay, this is the installation video for the Cradle O-ring piston for KJW M4s as well as the velocity reducer. Before you get started, you're going to want to get together a couple of basic tools. You're going to want to get a pair of pliers, 4mm Allen wrench, a pin punch, a Bic pen will also work, and a small flathead screwdriver. To start, you're going to want to split your upper receiver. Your pin may be tight. I know mine is. I use a pin punch for this. You can use chopsticks, a pen if you're willing to maybe break it. Just push the pin out. Remove your bolt carrier by pulling on the charging handle and removing it from the upper receiver. At this point you can set down your bolt carrier, shut your rifle, and put it somewhere safe. First thing you're going to do is you're going to remove the charging handle, the guide rod, and the rubber band. At this point, you can pull your piston cup away from the bolt carrier and let it rest to the side. Underneath you'll find your stock piston with the cup seal. From the factory, these come Loctited on and they're very hard to get off. You may need to use a pair of pliers here. You'll want to, if you want to protect the part from scratching, you'll want to wrap something around here. A couple pieces of duct tape can do the job, as well as a rag. And you'll want to grab the piston. And then you're going to insert your Allen wrench here underneath the bolt carrier. There's a bolt on the back side, and this is the bolt that holds the piston on. So while you're gripping, holding onto the piston, you're going to want to loosen this. I pre-loosened this because the Loctite that comes from the factory is quite strong. It can take quite a bit of work and quite a bit of time. Once you break the seal, you can normally end up holding the piston and twisting it off from the bolt carrier. With this part removed, you can go ahead and set it aside. You're not going to need it anymore. But you will need the included bolt with its lock washer. You want to clean it off. A lot of times there's a kind of a pasty goop on here. You can clean it off. You should clean it off. You don't have to necessarily. But you're also going to need some blue Loctite to secure the new piston to the bolt carrier. So go ahead and put just a drop of blue Loctite on this bolt. Set it to the side. At this point, you're going to want to get your O-ring piston, and again you're going to set the piston cup to the side, put it in place, and with Loctite on the bolt, you're going to insert it, and you're just going to tighten this back down. Now, one of the most important parts of this entire procedure is this step. The round portion here that's still part of the bolt carrier needs to be concentric. In other words, it needs to be lined up on the same axis as the piston. The parts are very close in size to one another. The best thing you can do is get a light underneath it or put a white piece of paper and do your best to line it up. Make sure that it's even all the way around, front, back, left, right. Once you got it even, just go ahead and tighten this bolt down. Again, you may need to grip the O-ring piston. If you do need to get this bolt tight enough, be very, very sure not to scratch the body of this piston. This one's been scratched due to repeated installation for the purposes of shooting the instructional photography as well as this video. It will function just fine. It's obviously not very cosmetic, but it's a hidden part. But you're not going to want to scratch it. Go ahead and you're going to want to tighten this down. It doesn't need to be too tight, but you want to get it to the point where your O-ring piston starts to maybe rotate slightly. You know it's tight enough at that point. Go ahead and you can put the piston cup back over it at this point. It may not shut fully. See a little bit of resistance. That's perfectly normal and totally okay. Wait at least 30 minutes before shooting the gun to let the Loctite fully cure. Now at this point of the installation is where we get to do the new velocity reducer. What I like to do, I like to leave the piston cup over the piston, and this is where you use your small flathead screwdriver to remove this small pin on the side of the piston cup. It's not threaded very deeply. You can just give it a couple of turns and it won't back out anymore at a certain point. Put your screwdriver down and grab the pin and remove it from the cup. Now you're going to take the piston cup, pull it away from the body, turn it, empty the parts out, and you'll find a small spring and the stock valve. Go ahead and set your stock valve aside, but keep the spring. Now here's the new part. You see it's slightly different in design, has a larger O-ring. Remove the O-ring and you'll get to stack a series of spacers onto the body of the valve. 6 spacers come included with the kit. 2 are 45 thousandths of an inch, 2 are 60 thousandths of an inch, 2 are 80 thousandths of an inch. To adjust velocity, you simply place one of the spacers over the body of the valve and replace the O-ring. By stacking different combinations, for instance an 060 and an 045, giving you a total spacing of 0.105, will reduce your velocity to a certain point. If you chronograph and your gun is still hot, you might want to add another spacer or remove the 060 and add an 080 in combination with the 040. It's basically a game of just adjusting the spacing until you reach your desired FPS. For my purposes, I'm going to install no spacers, just the O-ring. At this point, you're going to want to take the spring and drop it down inside the piston cup. At first, it might not drop into the nozzle. You need to shake it until it falls down inside the nozzle. Then, drop in the new valve. Again, I normally shake it a time or two until it's somewhat centered inside the piston cup. Now this is where the punch, the big pen, can come handy. You're going to want to move this thing until it's centered and then depress the spring using the punch or the pen. With the spring depressed, you can now insert the pin back in. It will stop halfway because it will run into your punch or pen. Once it stops, you can remove the punch or pen, push the pin the rest of the way in. Get your screwdriver, screw the pin back in to the piston cup, stretch it out over your new piston, install your O-ring, followed by your guide rod, followed by your charging handle. Once these are installed, you can put them back in your upper receiver. See, I made a mistake here pulling this pin out. These can be quite difficult to get back in. Go ahead and slide this back into the upper without pinching your rubber band. You'll close your upper. You'll reinstall your pin, which I can't do now. To reinstall the pin, rack the charging handle once, just to make sure that everything is seated properly, and you should be good to go.